We are live. Hey, Jordan. Thanks for taking 10 minutes out or 15 minutes out of your day to kind of answer some questions. And um,
Sure thing.
I guess if you wouldn't mind, introduce yourself and kind of your experience at Ranken, Technical College and afterwards.
Yeah, absolutely. So, my name is Jordan Nothstine. I went through Rankin's Internet and Web-based Technology program, which I'm not sure if the name has changed there, but I believe it was 2012 I started through 2014. And then after that, I briefly worked for a company called HDIS, which did some VB, some basic there, did a little different programming language than anything we did at Rankin, and then I eventually ended up, after having a brief stint working with Rankin, doing some networking. Um, Ended up at a company called National Information Solutions Cooperative, where we do primarily Java programming. And I enjoyed here. I've been here now for a little bit over 5 years, and I've learned a lot throughout that process. And I still enjoy it here. We've got a great culture, and I think that's an important thing about picking a workplace. I had a great experience with Rankin and a great experience sort of with the jobs I've had since. So it's been an interesting path, but this is kind of where I landed, and I really enjoy it here. So
Yeah, so spoiler alert, Jordan kind of led into that a little bit. You could have read through the lines. He did work for Rankin for a while, and we tried to keep him. He was a great guy to have on the team, but he moved on to bigger and better things. So always happy for him to do that. So and you've been working with Java, you said?
yeah, so I work almost exclusively in Java. We are working pretty extensively in house now with Angular JS. In a lot of our applications, we're pushing for most of our stuff to be hosted on the web, most of our applications to be on the web in the form of a service or microservice and web pages that our members can use versus having to use a native application. But historically speaking, I've worked on our native applications internally for the most part up to this point. Once we start retiring those, I'll be doing more web stuff as well. So
Okay, so you did Java for a long time, and that was on like kind of in-house application. And now everything's going web, so you're transitioning to Angular by the sounds of it. And so,
yep.
uh, have you? Is that in your future? Or are you kind of doing some Angular now?
I well, probably more so in the future as far as active development.
Yeah,
We've got a lot of our legacy code base is still in Java, and a lot of our services are hosted in Java. And so a lot of what I'm doing right now is migrating a lot of our services to be able to function with some of our microservices out in the cloud. But for the most part, the actual Angular portion I'll probably do more of in the future. I do participate in some of the peer reviews and pull requests. So I'm looking at the code, getting familiarized with the code base and where we're sort of going with things, but I don't actively do as much development in that code base right now.
got it. Cool, cool. No, that's kind of good to see where you're at and where you're going because, uh, you know, yeah, you're right. The program name did change. So what was once Internet and Web-based Technologies is now called Application and Web Development. Tick for tat, potato, potato. So it's got a new name. And while we're not teaching Angular, we are teaching React, and
Mhm.
so we are following that JavaScript trend and getting
Right.
on board with that. So that's some of the changes to our curriculum. So, um, what what advice would you do or would you give to someone who's brand new starting out? So that's who's primarily listening to you right now. People who
Hmm.
are just starting out. In fact, right now I'm teaching a JavaScript class, and we're 20 or
Okay.
30 days in, and
Yep.
so a lot of people just learning their first language, if you will, and
Yep.
some people doing better with it, some people struggling with it. What advice would you give?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I will say is when you first start programming, I think a lot of times you're dealing with the syntax portion of things. You're dealing with the algorithm portion of things. So you're dealing with learning basically how to get code to function with a lot of those. You're looking at loops, you're looking at conditional statements, you're looking at all that fun stuff. You're looking at a lot of the logic. That business logic is super important to be able to grasp. It's super important to get through. Knowing where to put your semicolons and how to format your code is very important. If there's one piece of advice I could give, it would be that once you start getting through that, once you start understanding the code, and whether or not it's you're looking at Java or you're looking at JavaScript, a lot of your programming challenges are going to be very similar. They're looking at the actual logic, they're looking at the actual algorithm, so that you can actually make code that functions. But that's only half of programming, and I think that the other half that gets sort of pushed by the wayside when you're a new developer is the fact that at the end of the day, you need to make code that functions. But if you also don't make good, clean code that's going to continue to work into the future, then you're going to run into some major setbacks. So at the end of the day, feel free, and this is something actually, some videos that I had just sent you that a guy named Uncle Bob, and this was some of his advice was that you need to remember. So he was talking about basically in a new programming environment, a lot of times the code base teaches you your habits. So you look at the code that someone else wrote and you think, oh wow, this is how things are done here at this company, and so you do the same thing, right? So, but sometimes that leads you down very, 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 very poorly designed program paths. So in other words, if you look at the code that a company has and think, oh, I should just do the same thing. Well, that's definitely not always true. In fact, a large percent of the time, that's probably not true, because in legacy code bases, there may have been a programmer just like you who was coming in and just doing what someone else did, and those things aren't always best practice. So at the end of the day, what I would recommend is learn the syntax, get through the stuff that you need to understand the logic, and then start taking a look at the strategy. And always trust that you need to continue to learn and grow as a developer. And just because someone else did something doesn't make it the right way to do things. And always try to come up with better ways to do things and improve your code base and keep it cleaner, keep it more readable, and keep it easier to grow. Because if you write code that's not easy to grow, you will run into some major bottlenecks in terms of continuing to build out your application. So always remember that half of your job is making something work, and the other half is keeping it in a maintainable state.
Yeah.
And a state that you can actually build upon, because someone else is going to come look at your code and they're going to have to figure out what it's doing.
Yeah.
And if you don't write it in such a way that it's easier to understand, then they're going to have a bad day.
Well, and that's good to hear, because, and I agree
Mhm.
with everything you said. I always describe it, and I can make it relatable, because a lot of people have learned a new skill, and I
Mhm.
like the analogy of skiing down a mountain. And so the first
Mhm.
time you're skiing down a mountain, whether it's on the bunny
Mhm.
slope or what have you, you're learning to ski, and essentially you're trying not to die, right? You're going
Right.
down this mountain and you're just trying to survive. And so a
Mhm.
lot of coders, as they're learning the syntax, the logic, all of the algorithms, they're literally just trying to get it to work. They're trying
Mhm.
not to quote unquote die or fail this class. They're just trying to barely get by. And and what your point is that there's stages. Stage one
Mhm.
is learning the fundamentals, learning the basics. But then once you master those basics, you can now go down the bunny slope. It's like, how can I do this more efficiently? How can I evolve what I know into, you know, another stage, which is, now I'm not worrying about dying. Now I'm trying to maybe even be more efficient, and so on and
Yep.
so forth.
Yeah, 100%. And at the end of the day, I think that it's very important to just remember that you need to continue to learn, and you need to take responsibility for the code that you write. Because if you're working for an organization that's dealing with money or that's dealing with systems that could have a mechanical component, you could be dealing with safety concerns with people, et cetera. Not to scare anyone in those regards, but at the end of the day, like, there is sort of a coding ethic where it's like, hey, continue to learn, continue to grow, and continue to do your best to write good, clean code to make sure that whatever asset you're responsible for at your company is sort of protected. And a lot of companies, I mean, obviously, again, not to scare anyone, because when you come into the programming workplace, there's not this heavy burden of responsibility that's going to be thrown on your shoulders right away. But at the end of the day, it's just basically a sort of a reminder to continue to learn and to grow, and to also, when you get to that place, to look into starting to deal with those strategies, and just always remember that half of your job is making something work, and the other half is making it function into the future.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Um, what uh, hmm, what did you do as a student to help you land your first job?
yeah, so I think a couple of the most important things outside of just study hard and get your work done, do your labs. I think that a couple of the things I did was, the first summer after the first year of school, I went and got an internship. That taught me a lot. And I personally, any internship you can land, paid, unpaid, these days, I think hopefully you can land a paid internship. We do some through my company, and it's been a really good experience, because a lot of times I've mentored some of the people that come in, and they sort of get to get some of that real world experience. And I think that the most important thing is just basically, if you can get a taste of programming culture and workplace culture as a developer, that's a huge thing. That's going to give you a leg up. That's going to give you hopefully a little bit of a taste that makes you a little bit hungrier for that research that I'm talking about, where it's like, okay, now I sort of understand what it's like to be presented with a problem, and the expectation isn't necessarily that someone else is going to hand me the solution. I need to find the solution. I need to implement the solution, and I'm sort of taking responsibility for that. So I think that getting an internship, if possible, is exceptional. I've also seen other people that have actually spent a good amount of time just programming or developing their own applications in their spare time. I think that would be a huge thing to do. One
So
of my
internship, any
old
sort of work
classmates,
experience, and then if not the work experience, kind of a freelance project, a freelance.
yeah, something to show basically. I think that was, one of my other classmates who I think was very successful, and in fact, actually the person who helped me get in the door here at NISC. He developed an application, and he was able to show people, and just having something to see, some code to go by. In fact, when I started working here, um, they actually gave me a project over the weekend, and they said, "Hey, please do this over the weekend, so we can see some examples of your code." Because I didn't have a lot of examples to show them,
Yeah.
even though I could point at some websites, etc. They wanted to see me actually do some object-oriented programming, and then explain what I had done, so they could see my thought processes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So those
So
are two things I recommend.
so that's a really good point, and I'm just going to elaborate a little bit on that. So his
Mhm.
classmate, Brian, I know Brian very well.
Yep,
Is he still working at NISC?
he is. Yep,
Yep, great. I always get that confused with NCIS, right? I'm sure everyone does,
right.
right?
It's easy to
Uh,
yeah, it's easy to do.
so if you guys ever get a chance, if you Google them real quick, that company. I mean, I've taken a tour of this company many times. It's a jaw-dropping experience to take a tour of this company. It is really a cool company to work at. At least it seems so from an outsider's point of view. But what Brian did was this was before we taught mobile apps in our code, in our curriculum, and Brian went ahead and built an Android app. And we had an employer come to an employer breakfast one time. That employer was NISC, and they said, "Hey, we got a mobile app. We're looking to bring on any interns." For anyone who was looking to write some Java, some Android development. And he came in front of my class, and Brian could say, "Well, look at what I did. I built the thing. I built this thing. It's on the Play Store." And the guy was like, "Okay, come work for us." I mean, it was essentially that smooth, because he had built a thing that this employer was looking sort of for. And so, yeah, so internships are great if you can get a part-time job, but if you can't get that internship or that part-time work, any sort of freelance project will really help you along. And that's what helped Brian get in the door, which ultimately Brian and Jordan are buddies. And that, as he said, that kind of helped Jordan as well. Um,
Yep.
so that's awesome. So yeah, you're in a break room now. You mentioned off camera that, you're still working from home a few days a week.
Mhm. Yeah, so we're in office 2 days a week at this point. For the rest, we're working remotely. We over the last year and a half, up until about 2 months ago, we worked completely remotely, and we've actually had really good productivity during those times. I think a lot of traditional employers worry that if people work remotely, that you might see a drop in productivity, but we've managed to sustain good productivity, and it's been a good experience. So
Cool.
yeah.
Very awesome. Very awesome. Um, again, without being into the specifics, what kind of salary expectations would you think are wise for kind of like the newcomer coming out of Rankin? What kind of would your goals be around salaries?
Yeah, well, okay, so based on what I was at the time to now, obviously 2014 to 2021, um, I would say it's probably shifted some. I think at the time I was shooting for around 40, which I think was very reasonable, and that was pretty easy for me at the time to sort of net that. But at this time, I probably bumped that up by at least 10,000, and put it somewhere in the 50 to 60 thousand dollar range as a application developer.
Nice.
Um, so I think based on what I know, I mean, obviously with a few years experience, there's companies that are paying really really good money out there, and but I also think you look at culture and you look at the industry that you're in. St. Louis, we actually have a pretty booming programming industry as far as I'm aware at the moment, and so yeah, I'd say 50,000 would be pretty solid, pretty acceptable at this point in time. But I don't shop around enough at this point to give you a better figure.
Yeah,
So
yeah, good answer. uh, no, those are all reasonable numbers, and that's kind of in line with what I see. So I would agree. So that's awesome. Um, let's see. So those are the basic questions that I typically have. Anybody out there in my audience got any questions for Jordan? Did you guys take a look at NISC? So let's talk about your company real quick. So what are the
mhm.
highlights of working for your company?
Yeah, so it's a really cool place, where basically we have a really solid industry that we work with, which is sort of utilities and telecommunication companies. So that lands us in a really good spot because we're dealing with infrastructure, right? So you're looking at anything from internet to cell phones to TV to water, sewage, and electric, in the United States. So because of that, we have really good business. We've done really well throughout the last year and a half, but also we know that we have to remain competitive in the market, because programming, the way it is, applications change, they shift, times change, they shift, and you have to basically keep up with things. But we've done a really good job of that. We have a really good progressive culture. Our leadership looks at what needs to happen, how we need to stay relevant and current in today's market. We shift towards those things when needed. Hence, doing the Angular and the microservices and all that fun stuff to basically make sure that our applications are accessible. There's something that can continue to grow and that they're sustainable into the future. And we're providing what we need for our members so that they get the applications and the services they need to be able to maintain their jobs. Because a lot of what we do is basically enabling them to continue doing the work, the heavy duty work of sort of keeping people's internet and power going. So, but it's a really cool company. We've got a great culture internally. As you can see, I'm not 100% inside of Rankin's sort of specs for what you'd normally. I've got a hat on. I've got my beard a little longer than would be acceptable in class. So it's a different culture, I mean, any place you look at, you have to be willing to be like, what is the culture here? Does it fit what I'm looking for? And this place it's great. It's been a really good experience. We're really progressive. We have a great communication style internally. Learned a lot. We've basically just maintained a culture of communication throughout. I don't have a boss that's like, hey, here's what you need to do. Here's how we're going to do it. And there's sort of, this is what it is. It's more of a culture of being able to to have that input where you're like, hey, let's look at what everyone has to say, and if somebody wants to step in and say, here's a technology we should be using internally, this is going to help us out. Like that is engineering, software engineering. It's saying, hey, we can program, we can write code all day, but what technologies are we using? What boundaries are we pushing to make things more progressive and to make things easier for us, to make things more sustainable? And so there is sort of that culture of sort of being able to learn from each other, co-learning and cohabitating in a space where you have opinions and you can bring those things to the table. And that's what is important for me at NISC. Is I feel like as in my professional development, I've been able to sort of grow and have an input, and to be able to sort of have good communication with my coworkers, with my boss, etc., and continue to sort of learn and grow without sort of having sort of that corporate culture that's very cog in the machine. And so that to me was something that was really important. I feel very fortunate to have found it here, and so that's, I think, what's kept me here and kept me liking it. So
Awesome. Well, man, I'm super happy for you. Again, if you ever want to come back to Rankin, the door is always open. You were an awesome guy to know. Thank you so much for letting us pick your brain for 15 minutes. Yeah, questions. Yep. The question was, how did you do academically while you were at Rankin? Were you a straight A student? Were you kind of hit and miss, or?
yeah, so I got 1B. Let's put it that way. So just to be straight up honest, I got 1B, and it was in Java, which is currently what I do. But if I could stress that, yes, you should work very hard. You should worry about your grades, but as much as the grades, I think at the time I was more worried about the grade than I was about learning. And I would say that's a
See, you
mistake.
sound like a teacher. You sound like sound like a teacher. Go ahead.
uh, but just to say, like, yeah, like I did well, but I don't think that made a difference in terms of me getting a job. My
Yeah.
GPA did not necessarily factor in. It was, what can you do on paper? What can you do on paper? But what can you do practically? What can you show us? And so while I will
Yeah.
say push for high grades, I will also say push for learning over high grades. Keep your grades high, yeah, absolutely. Focus on that, but focus on learning the programming and feeling like when you walk in at the end of the day after 2 years, there's a ton to learn. But just keep in mind that you're not just memorizing answers on a test. You're learning the information you need to be successful into the future. So
Yeah.
I think, in fact, I don't know if Mr. Jaczynski is still there. I think he may have retired.
He
But
retired.
he was
Yeah.
my operating systems teacher, and that one thing he said to me at the first day of class was, the best thing I can teach you is how to teach yourselves. And I think that that's advice that's just continued to sort of have staying power with me over the years. Um, and so, yeah, I would say definitely push for the grades, but at the end of the day, learn the information you need. That's the important thing.
Awesome. Awesome. Other questions for Jordan? One that was asked a little bit earlier was, if they wanted to intern at NISC, what advice would you give them? How could they find out about those opportunities?
Yeah, I mean, so I would have to get a little more information on that to answer that better. I would say I believe that you can absolutely go to the National Information Solutions Cooperative website, and you should be able to. In fact, I can jump over there real quick and see how obvious it is. Um,
Just hit the website and apply and find the intern position.
yeah, that would be my best advice at this point. We have, if you Google us, you'll find open positions right on there. There should be internships posted. The good thing about our internships is they are all paid. So it is not, yeah, there's absolutely an internships header that's got a number of programming.
So I'm on NISC careers,
Yep. And then there's an open positions. And then under there's an internships.
internships right at the top.
I believe it's a little bit down underneath our engineering and design,
Yep.
but it's a large section. There's a lot of postings. There's ones, we have a couple different locations, but the Lake St. Louis ones are obviously the ones that we would be that y'all would be interested in. We also have a mandate in a Cedar Rapids location, but obviously the Lake St. Louis is is the
Awesome.
place
Yeah,
to go for that.
I just scrolled down. I mean, there's a page full of intern,
Yep.
but Lake St. Louis is where your office is. So you want to find the ones that say Lake St. Louis.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, either way, if they were to give you a call, it'd probably be fine. It wouldn't matter which location. But we've got our recruiters here, so I'm assuming go with the Lake St. Louis. Again, they're paid internships. If you land one, they're really nice. We've had a number of people on our team. I've had the pleasure of mentoring a few of them so that I can sort of just get them spooled up on what we're doing and get them, and working with them on basically doing some paired programming, that kind of stuff. That stuff's invaluable to getting out of college and having that experience. So I think if you can land one of those, I think it would be an exceptional opportunity. A large number of our interns are offered positions here and have the potential to come work for us after the fact if they're interested. So it's a big deal if you can get one of those. I think for our company it's a big deal. We prefer to hire people that we've worked with before and that we
Yep.
trust. So
Yep. Any other questions? Thanks so much, Jordan. Hey, it was good
yeah,
talking to you. I haven't talked to you in quite
definitely.
some time. So, um, Jordan kind of mentioned casually that he gave a resource. I'm definitely going to share this with you guys. It's basically a YouTube channel for targeting entry level programmers and just some solid foundations. And so I'll definitely share that with you guys. So thanks for sharing with that, Jordan, and thanks for sharing your time.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, man. Take care. Talk to you later.
You too. Appreciate it.
Bye.
Bye bye.